All right, welcome back to the program. Dr. Jumoke Oluwole joins me now. She is the special advisor on advisor to the president on the ease of doing business. Dr. Jumoke Oluwole, welcome to the program. And nice having you here again. Now let's get started and let me go back. Go back to business. There's a song like that, you know, but I can't. Let's go back. Why was the Ease of Doing Business initiative created since Payback was inaugurated in 2016?
So Payback was inaugurated to coordinate the business climate intervention at the federal level. It's not that nobody was ever doing anything to make the business climate easier, but it wasn't targeted, it wasn't coordinated. So you have a presidential level initiative chaired by the Vice President with the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment as Vice Chair, and about 13 other ministers. The idea is to have everyone who matters to the business climate on one council working on the specific problems of the business climate. We quickly realized that we needed subnationals in the room. We needed National Assembly, judiciary, of course, private sector, even down to local government. That was added later, AMAC. So it's a coordinated approach because it's one economy that we're solving for, and private sector agnostic to layers of government, arms and levels of government.
Okay. Now, this is a nationalized report, as it were. Why is this report, nationalized report, different from what the World Bank used to do, which ended in 2020? Because Dr. J laughs, smiles or laughs.
Yeah.
Because I know I've been following the Ease of Doing Business report of the World Bank for many years, where they rank countries and all of that. And I do know, okay, they have things that are around taxes. They look at regulation. They look at your ports and all of that. But why is this nationalized report different from that of the World Bank? And it ended in 2020.
Yeah. So the World Bank rankings at the country level takes the major city, the major commercial hub, and looks at that and extrapolates the entire economy. Nigeria, because we had a population of over 100 million, had two cities, Lagos and Kano. But Nigeria is also one of the few countries that World Bank had a subnational report for. They actually had a report deep diving Nigeria. So that was the genesis of this. The tool was a bit shallow in terms of regulatory environment, maybe some judicial interventions, but we needed a lot more. Infrastructure, security, things that were just peculiar to Nigerian businesses. So we decided to have our own homegrown report to augment what the World Bank was doing. The World Bank's country report comes out every 4 years for Nigeria. So we wanted to have this come in every 2 years just to keep things moving. But World Bank discontinued theirs, as you mentioned. Thankfully, we had already started ours. But we then went back to the drawing board to deepen the methodology, having engaged with states and the private sector. And so this 2.0 is more robust, it's more nuanced, is more statistically significant.
I don't know if I really got the difference between the World Bank and the nationalized reports. Are you saying, yes, I need you to explain it.
So the World Bank was looking at the regulatory environment, starting a business, looking at, I believe, also taxes.
Taxes,
and
infrastructure,
and then starting,
no, it's yours that looks at infrastructure.
Yes. So the World Bank was looking at, I think, courts, small claims courts. But we actually developed a technical working group, and we developed a framework for the 2021 report. We started this intervention in 2017, and we decided that we wanted to look at security and infrastructure. Of course, the regulatory environment is like the bread and butter of ease of doing business, but we wanted to look at workforce readiness and access to information. And it's because these are the things that small businesses and any sort of investor wants to know. If you want to situate a business around maybe Adamawa, for example, you want to know what kind of labor is there? Do they have an investment promotion agency? What is the regulatory environment like? Is it safe? Is it secure? What's the infrastructure like? So that snapshot is what our basic framework, initially 4 indicators. But after feedback and after engaging states, because the first report was a baseline survey, didn't have any government input at all, and it's a perception index. So it's a perception index of what private sector felt about each state's business environment as at that time. So 2 years later, on the build-up to this second edition of the report, we did an overhaul of the methodology, and we separated infrastructure and security. So now we have a secure and stable environment as a standalone indicator. We also added a new indicator called economic opportunity. And that's because a lot of MSMEs talk about access to credit, access to FX, how to go about getting that, and that would be, of course, of interest to you as yeah, for Moneyline. So we added that indicator. So we have 6 indicators now instead of 4, and it's a bit more nuanced and detailed.
Okay, because I was coming to that question in the sense that what is the difference between the 2021 report and 2023?
Yeah.
Because I know in the 2021 report that states did not really have much of an input. It was more of perception, you know, feedback from citizens in the state and private sector.
I mean, it's always perception. So even the World Bank Doing Business report is also a perception, in that no matter what government says, if the private sector doesn't validate that this is the case, then it doesn't make it into the report. This time we had a right of response for states to contribute, and about 11 states took up that opportunity to communicate the reforms that they'd implemented. So we wouldn't say that no other state did anything, but these 11 states submitted their reforms, and we had qualitative sessions in addition to the quantitative data that was collected from over nearly 3,000 companies across the country.
Okay, now let's go to the rankings, because that's, I think, where it gets interesting, and perhaps that's where you might be getting calls from the governors or from the states that seemingly did well. Those that did not do well, yes, that's it. Can we take from number 1, please, where we have Gombe State? We're taking it from perhaps the middle. There, let's take it from where we have Gombe State. Like I mentioned in my intro, Gombe State came up tops again. This is the second time. Came up tops in 2021, is coming up top in 2023. Speak to us about why this is, and let's quickly run through some of those states. And also just oppose it to, okay, that's it there on the screen. Also just oppose it to the fact that when I saw you did the report, you sent it to me. In fact, was it on Monday?
Monday.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I was on there. I was like, oh, I wish, you know, but I mentioned it, and I said I was going to look at it. But when I saw the report and I was going through the report, what was coming to my mind is that states like Gombe, Jigawa, Sokoto State keep doing well on the rankings, yet I cannot relate it with some of the economic indicators that come out from there, such as poverty rate in Sokoto, for example, is 87%. In Gombe, almost, you know, Jigawa,
so I'll explain.
Yes.
So there are different kinds of reports you can have. You have your human indicators reports. This is a business climate report. And globally, it seems counterintuitive to a lot of people, but our team wasn't particularly surprised in 2021 or this year. So globally, Nancy, even with the World Bank Doing Business report, you have Singapore, New Zealand topping the rankings.
Dr. J, don't tell me that you won't see US.
You will not see US as
Is that the justification for this?
No, I'm going to explain. In Africa, you would see Mauritius, Rwanda. In Nigeria, you would see Gombe, Jigawa. The reason is that when there's less complexity, it's easier. If you have less complexity in your economy and you're doing the work, it's easier to get reforms done. It's easier to communicate. It's easier, you know, it's a perception index. How satisfied are the businesses in your climate?
So doesn't it now lead, because I guess that, or I should know, that the backbone of what you're doing is to
let me tell you, that is why we are not so hung up on rankings. The reason why we rank the states is that it creates healthy rivalry. It gets everybody's attention. We as a team, we're more focused on the score, and we're more focused on on trajectory. How a state or how a country, for instance, Nigeria moved up our score 4 years in a row, 39 points in the rank. But there was a year that we didn't even move up, but our score moved up, and that was more important to us. Now, what it means for a state, if it's translating into movement in your GDP, whether you're ranked number 1 or number 20, if we see the movement, because this is the perception of private sector, in an economy that is a lot more demanding and complicated. It's more difficult to have satisfaction from all your stakeholders. And this is a randomized survey. We're speaking to everybody across the states. And what we are after is for states to be moving in the right direction. And this is not a random, how do you feel satisfaction, just are you happy, are you sad, do you like your governor, do you not? No, there are specific indicators, 6 indicators, 16 sub-indicators, and specific questions targeted at answering all those. You would see from the report that what we know anecdotally has played out in the data. 41% is covered by infrastructure and secure and stable environment. What does this mean? Edo, for example, was marked down because of an electricity challenge going on in the state. Not because the Edo state government hasn't been working very hard.
I was surprised with Edo when I saw it number 37.
Yeah.
It ranked the bottom.
Yeah, and we ran these numbers 3 times. We triangulated, we weeded out any sort of sentimental or badly answered questionnaires to make sure that it's robust information. What we have in this report is what private sector is saying. There are other states that implemented reforms, but private sector actually said it, that those were not their own priorities. Delta implemented reforms. The private sector said, yes, there were reforms, but those were not our priorities. So you have a number of things going on. It's important. Some states actually improved in their score, and their rankings went down because other states did even better. Like that happened with Nasarawa.
I was coming to that.
Yeah. So rankings are good for attention, but we as a team, because we're focusing on an empirical report, we're much more interested in the data and what it means and what recommendations can states take out of it as they're planning their strategies, because this is also linked with SABR.
Yes, SABR.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's linked.
Yes, yes.
So it's 2 sides of the same coin.
Yeah, coin.
We want the business climate improved. We want reforms done. We want states to have their annual state action plans and to implement them.
And for the SABR, these states came up tops. Because I remember I was at I think at the Hilton in December.
That was SIFTAS.
Yes, okay, no,
yes, that was SIFTAS.
That was SIFTAS.
But there's a correlation.
But there's a correlation,
yes,
actually. That's actually where I'm going to.
Between rigor and empiricals and following the reform process and setting an action plan. Honestly, states that are doing well on this report, you check other indicators. Gombe is doing very well in health. You check other indicators. Jigawa fought for power for the state. The governor personally fought for access to power in the state, their power situation. The state, the businesses are telling us, and if you have about 10 hours of electricity stable, or at least access to public electricity in a state per day, the businesses are quite happy. So this information is not emotional or sentimental. This is what private sector is saying that is affecting their bottom line. Even with something like security and stable environment, this is not randomized like any question, kidnapping this. This is like a business, your bottom line. Were you burgled? Did you make a report to the police? Were you attended to? What happened? Was the case solved? All the questions have to do with a business and the bottom line of that business. And the businesses did answer the questions as it relates to their businesses. So it's not a perception index for the whole of the country. It's not on education or poverty. It's not on even our larger security challenges. It's about the business climate.
Okay, I know you've just told me it's about the business climate, but I'm still thinking if I can relate it. Because if the businesses are feeling this way in the various states of the country, I suppose that, for example, in Jigawa, where you said that the power situation has increased, the governor is doing well in that, and I'll come back, what's coming to my mind, I'll come back to some of the bills that the president signed, and how it might impact this, is that, don't you think that the states, the businesses in the states will do better, thereby increasing their bottom line, and also getting more jobs for people? Because
that is the exact aim.
Which would also impact the economic indicators of the state.
Yes, but this is not what is being measured by this report.
Yes, I know.
But ease of doing business as a whole speaks to elevating economic prosperity for all, because we know there's a strong correlation between poverty and between insecurity. Job creation, inclusive growth. So these are all the larger economic issues that the government as a whole will be tackling, this is one of the tools that government uses to address some of those challenges.
Okay, let's still stick a bit with the rankings. Like I mentioned earlier, Gombe is #1, Jigawa #2, like you saw earlier on the slide. The Northeast and Northwest doing quite well, at least with this ranking, at least almost back to back. Then let's take a look at states like Anambra, for example. Anambra is topping the list in the Southeast as a Southeast states. Then I think Plateau also tops the list for its region. Can you speak to me about some of these states?
I can speak to you certainly about Anambra. Anambra has been holding steady for quite a while. The team there has been very, very dedicated to this agenda. They were members of the technical working group. Another state that has been holding very steady is Kaduna State. I mean, there's states that have prioritized this agenda, not in a casual way. They're very detailed about the work they do. States like Nasarawa, the governor chairs the Ease of Doing Business Council himself. So you see the implication and the import in the rankings. The rankings are just confirming some of the things that we already know anecdotally, which is not to say there are quite a few other states that are prioritizing this agenda. Kwara State, I mean, I don't even just want to go into states because I'll end up getting into trouble. The rankings reflect what the private sector are saying. And this, Nancy, has to do with communication. So we always tell state governments that it's not enough to implement a reform if the private sector don't know that the reform has been implemented. So communication, communication, communication. And then if you implement a reform that is not the priority of your private sector, then it also doesn't have the desired effect. So engagement, engagement. So we at the Payback, we set annual action strategic plans. We have a ton of stakeholder engagements to feel the pulse of the private sector, to know what to prioritize. Some years it's tax, so we're automating tax processes, filing, and some years it's starting a business. We work on other things, but you have your top priorities that you know that this year you really just must crack this issue. So for us, even power is not per se a Payback mandate. Payback is soft infrastructure. But there's no way that you can interview private sector and start telling them, oh, you can talk about this, but you can't talk about that. Government is government. They feel the pain. They feel the pain. So whether it's federal, state, local government, whether it's even a legislative matter or judicial intervention, private sector just see government and they're like, just solve my problem. And another thing is that a lot of businesses that we interview, they do business across state lines. So if you deal in maybe if you're in manufacturing, you're getting inputs from upcountry, you're manufacturing in another part of the country, you're selling or you're exporting through another part of the country. So they're crossing state lines. So some of them are feeling the pain in different places, and they're feeling also regulatory challenges through federal agencies. So we released our EO1 ranking report just about 3 weeks ago. So us at the Payback, we're trying to work with empirical data to give federal government and state governments data, information to make credible reforms, and also to give private sector a voice. MSMEs in particular are fragmented, they're decentralized. They don't always have very strong lobby or very strong organized private sector. They have a few, they have NASME, NASIMA, but there are millions, over 40 million of them across the country. We need to go to them. So we go on tour quite a bit. We go every region we've been at least 3 times around the country. And what that does is that they know that there's a team listening to them and solving for them. And so we work with our state colleagues to come up with action plans, and that's where SABRE comes in. And then this is the other side of the coin. Is private sector validating what we say we're doing at the public sector end? That sweet spot, we will see it in our bottom line, which is our collective bottom line is our GDP. We will see the movement in the GDP if we put in the rigor as a collective, as Team Nigeria.
Okay. Another interesting thing which you raised a bit, but I still want us to look at, is that, you know, some states went up in score, but lower in ranking. States like I saw Nasarawa, for example, in 2021 got 5.20, and was number 23 in 2021 with 5.20 points. In 2023, 5.35, higher score, but number 26. So state like Nasarawa, you know, which other states also came to mind? Even Anambra. Anambra in 2021 got 6.35 points and was number 7. 2023, 6.19 points and was still number 7.
Yeah, even Gombe, even Gombe came down marginally.
Yeah.
Nancy, what that tells us is that as a country, as a whole, there's a lot, despite the sustained push, you know how hard we work and how much we try, despite the sustained push, there's still so much work to be done. But it's also heartwarming in the sense that another way to look at it is that despite the significant headwinds, we're still holding the line. There was COVID. The first report was right out of COVID, and there's been, you know, so much has happened: recessions, war in Ukraine, different things, and we're still holding the line. That says a lot to the hard work of the state governments and the federal government.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk about the major economic states, really, because another thing that was very interesting for me, Lagos.
Yes.
Lagos number 20 in 2021 with 5.28 points. With 5.16 points, number 29. States like also Kano, where's Kano here? I hope that's it also on the screen there. Kano number 32 out of 37 in 2021 and came up this time to number 16. But one would expect that these major economic zones or major economic states in Nigeria would even be doing better than some other states, because people think, the perception is that, okay, I can really start a business in Lagos, I can do this.
You know, Nancy, that's where I started from, that an economy like US, even like China, you wouldn't find them topping rankings chart. The reason why, and it's not impossible, but what makes it harder for a state like Lagos, being the commercial capital of the country, is that the stakeholders are that much more demanding and informed. So Lagos has implemented quite a few reforms. We've worked very closely with the Lagos State and Kano State government from inception of this project. But this is the perception from private sector. So it just shows each state where to pay more attention and what needs to be done, whether it's stakeholder engagements, whether it's prioritizing, whether it's, I mean, it's really customized to each state and each business environment. But it's not to say, I mean, Lagos has had, even in several areas, LSETF, there's several reforms that Lagos has that have been very well received by their stakeholders, but they still are saying something else. And it's disaggregated.
What are the people saying, for example, in states that declined, so to speak, in rankings?
So it varies, but if I take the national picture, the economic opportunity was the lowest. So that was under 4. Now it's new, but it was the lowest. And so the whole FX challenge, access to credit, those are being felt across the economy. I should say that for sizes of businesses, the problems are the same. For industries, different sectors, certain sectors were happier than others, but geographically, that's where you saw the big difference. And that also speaks to just even levels of stress. Just even how do I get around, because there's transport, there's logistics, there's electricity, so there's access to information, there's broadband. So all those things, businesses are looking at, as a business, what's my stress level? What does it take to get my C of O? What does it take to access credit? What does it take to move around? What does it take to move my goods from point A to point B? How much electricity do I have? How easy is it to pay my taxes? So the questionnaire took them through a whole bunch of things. And the pain points just rose up. And this is what they're saying. We cannot say, we have to listen to private sector. We have to listen to MSMEs. And we have to take them at their word and address these pain points.
Okay.
And we have to communicate that we are doing this
How important is that communication? Because you've
It
been
is,
hammering communication.
it is extremely
Because
important.
you are actually right. In fact, at the conference that this show had, Moneyline with Nancy had, a personal and business acceleration masterclass
Okay.
in September, and we had close to 400 people in the room. And we got, you know, stakeholders like regulatory bodies come to speak about what they were doing.
You didn't invite Payback, Nancy.
Oh, okay, this
You know,
year.
we talked about this before. You
Yes,
told me
yes,
about it
I
after the
did.
fact. We would have
Oh,
come to tell them all
oh,
about our
the
reforms next time.
Oh, okay, next time actually. You know, so for example, there is what they call the collateral registry. And there were a lot
That's a
of
Payback reform.
yes, and there were a lot of MSME owners in the room.
Yeah.
And they actually said there was no collateral. They don't know about it.
They
That
don't
was
know
the first
about
time.
it.
Something like that.
Yes.
So it got me. I had to, like, a lot of people don't have information. Is it that this, like, for instance, the state governments are not communicating, or they are not communicating well, or they are not communicating the language that their people understand?
Communication is never enough. That's why we speak so much. Collateral registry, excellent intervention by the central bank, had
yes.
been on. It needed legislation. So we worked with the central bank, with the National Assembly to push that. We also worked on credit bureaus. Those are two reforms. That year, Nigeria ended up ranked number 6 in the world for our enabling environment on access to credit. But the manifestation, the implementation of that, still the financial institutions giving out the actual credit, even though the government has put in place an enabled environment, didn't quite happen. So with collateral registry, we have to keep communicating. We even, in our Payback play, we even put that in there, that those are some of the things that businesses don't know about. Some businesses still don't know that you can register a business online, that you can file and pay your taxes online.
That you can even be the only owner.
That you can be the only owner.
Anymore.
All the CAMA reforms. Talk less, or we haven't talked about all our Business Facilitation Act reforms. We haven't talked about, I mean, there's been quite a bit. So we know the importance of communicating, if not all this work by all the MDAs, by the National Assembly, our small claims court. If we don't keep speaking about these things, they remain on the shelf.
Okay, Dr. J, I'm looking at our time because I have another guest, and I hope I can have you here again. We'll talk about that. I will have you here again soon. The Business Facilitation Act, which the President signed just recently, I would like you to speak about that and how you think that might likely impact the EODB, that is the ease of doing business, as well as even some of the constitutional amendment bills that the President said, like electricity, that states can now generate their electricity, even have their own railway. How do you see it playing out, especially in states? Then the third part of my question is, sorry, Dr. J, is that for this ranking now, have states been in contact with your office as to, oh, doctor, I'm seeing that our position has gone down. What have we done? Or are you only getting calls from the good guys on the list?
No, we had a 2-hour technical deep dive on Monday as the report was launched, as it was released. We gave a few hours for assimilation, and then from 3 to 5, we were all on a call, a Zoom meeting, over 100 participants. We've been working very closely with our colleagues at the subnational level, so it's not really a surprise. We took all the feedback from 2021. We had even a retreat here in Abuja, which the Payback did sponsor, and we got all our colleagues here so that we could get to know each other and speak and plan. You know how hard we worked with SABA, that's with Honorable Commissioners of Finance especially, and their teams. So we're not strangers to each other. They didn't just see this in the report. Some of these challenges, they know about it already. Some have come to the fore and they're already working on it. But sometimes there's a lag between working on it and your stakeholders knowing that something has been done or that you're working on it, which speaks to communication again. With issues like electricity, speaking to the infrastructure challenge and how big it is, and security and secure and stable environment, those pop up like excavated ease of doing business challenges. With this constitutional amendment, now on the concurrent list, states have asked for a long time to be able to have power, to be able to generate their own power rail. So this is a good move in the right direction. Years ago, Lagos tried with ESCOM and couldn't close that deal. Now those sorts of deals. So even decentralized power, solar projects, IPPs, but at a larger scale, it's also an opportunity to get investors in. So that's that. With the Business Facilitation Act, It amends 21 pieces of legislation, varied. This was based on almost 5 years of work with private sector, Section of Business Law, Nigerian Bar Association, over 40 law firms volunteered pro bono, National Economic Summit Group, and NASPA from National Assembly. Of course, Ministry of Justice, a lot of hard work pulling all that together for private sector. Importantly, it codifies EO1, which is the first executive order of this administration. So all the directives, like having a single interface at the ports, all the directives about the airports, the seaports, interfaces between government, service levels agreements are now legally binding on the government. So a lot for private sector to take in and to deploy.
Dr. Jumoke, you know, having you here all the time, we can as well go the long haul, 1 hour, and we'll still be talking, but we have to end at this point.
Yeah.
I will have you soon. We'll talk about that later. Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome.
All right, I've been speaking with Dr. Jumoke Oluwole, who is the special advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari on the ease of doing business.